there, I'm Gilad Barash, and welcome to Who's Your Data, the podcast that deals with how data influences life and how life influences data, the human side of data analytics. Hey everyone, welcome to Who's Your Data podcast. In this episode, we talk to Fara Ashiru Jituboh, co-founder and CEO of Okra, a Nigerian financial tech startup whose mission is to digitize financial services in Africa and connect 1 billion Africans to the global economy. We discuss what it means to build Africa's financial data network, the social consequences like building and strengthening a middle class. We discuss how they think about the financial data they collect and use it for anything from personalization of services to fraud detection, all while maintaining privacy and security for their customers. We also touch on Fara's experience as a Black female tech startup founder and hear her one word of advice for anyone embarking on the path of entrepreneurship. Okay, ready? Let's get to the conversation. Fara, hi, and thank you for joining the Who's Your Data podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I wanted to talk to you about the company that you founded, Okra, that is building open finance infrastructure in Africa. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you found yourself founding a fintech startup in Nigeria?
Sure. So I'm Nigerian. I was born in Nigeria, but I grew up in the States. And after school, I went on to kind of work at big corporate companies. So I've been coding since I was a kid, probably 10 years old. And I've been building websites and different little applications and always trying to solve my own personal problems. And I went on to study computer science. And afterwards I worked at JP Morgan, I worked at Fidelity Investments, but then I really wanted to kind of work for startups and work on really cool projects and really cool technologies a lot of my friends were kind of building in. And so I started working at different startups, and then I started working at startups that were solving problems in different parts of the world. And that really got really exciting to me, the understanding of localizing ideas for different markets, thinking that you can do one thing but maybe it doesn't work somewhere else because of XYZ. I moved back to Nigeria in 2014, and then I actually came to visit, funny enough, and then it kind of turns into moving back, because when I visited I realized that wow, there's so much opportunity, so many things to build, so many of the coolest apps. The things that you're used to using, they don't even exist here today.
Right.
But I understood these kind of ideas, but I also understood Nigeria, I understood the context. So I kind of understood also how to kind of localize those things.
Yeah, that's context. A really great sweet spot.
Yeah, exactly. As I grew, I thought, okay, in the beginning, of course, you make mistakes because you're coming from the US and everything that works there doesn't work here, as a copy and paste. But as you start to understand kind of how to localize that, started to just build really cool things. And I think the idea from Okra really started from wanting to build a lot of things and not thinking the rails and the infrastructure to do that existed.
Okra is building open finance infrastructure in Africa. Can you talk a little bit about what that means?
At Okra, essentially, we're on a mission to digitize financial services in Africa. And what we believe is that, our mission is to connect 1 billion Africans to the global economy. We feel like our customers don't even really exist yet today because how far, financial services can go, the opportunity for Africa to compete in the fourth industrial revolution is intrinsically tied to, the infrastructure that we're building. And we're essentially on a mission to build Africa's unified banking API, across the continent, essentially enabling financial services apps, enabling connections into the global economy as well.
So you're enabling personalized digital services for customers in a continent that basically has the largest number of unbanked people, right?
When I moved back to Nigeria in 2014, I moved in with my parents because when you think about having to, rent a place or a house or apartment, you're paying your rent all up front. When you see people driving around in cars, it's because they bought that entire car in cash. And that's really because, we didn't have, the information to, have a credit history, to have, to credit worthiness, to understand someone's not just ability, but also willingness to pay, but also in order to give access to credit and plans for the working class as well. And so essentially what we're trying to do is democratize that access. So build that bridge that actually enables that. So now, rather than having to pay my entire rent up front, I can pay it in monthly installments. I can buy a car, and pay my car note, or I can even, transfer money easily to my friends and family, regardless of, what you're trying to do within that financial space, we can actually enable you to do that.
Okay, I see. So, and that actually comes into my next question as far as who are Okra's customers and what different types of services do you offer?
So our clients and our customers are, any business that wants to, digitally transform, any business that wants to serve their customers digitally. And what I mean by that is that we kind of see ourselves enabling you to create that financial journey. So whether or not you're trying to onboard your customer, we have products like Identity to like enable you have like a KYC or KYB of your customer, quickly onboard them. Whether or not you want to like assess credit worthiness or risk, or whether you want to build personalized services, we give you access to like real-time data, like their transactional history, their balance statements, et cetera. And then lastly, if you want to get paid or send money, we give you access to bank payments as well. So we kind of see ourselves as kind of like completing that full circle. Oh, and then you also asked about customers as well, like who they are. You see yourself serving customers, sit like a lending company that wants to, borrow money, or you want, or a digital bank that, wants you to be able to, consolidate your bank accounts and send money to your friends, or even, a food delivery company that you just want to pay and, order your food and have it delivered. It's essentially all companies that, need to reach their customers digitally. And we also even work with the banks as well. Because even when it comes to a bank, they also know that the new ways to scale is not opening up more branches and physical branches, is really just giving your customers access to more personalized solutions that they want within your application as well, and then give them access to the data to help them do that.
From a data and a tech perspective, Africa is really growing.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what opportunities there are and maybe some risks as far as privacy, security?
So just to kind of go back to that, the whole Web 2.0, it's, when you look at, what Africa was doing at the time, or Nigeria specifically was doing at that time, we were building the telecommunication, rails. So like, we went directly to, to mobile web. So you had more of like the app generation coming on board. But now when it comes to like the fourth industrial revolution, that's not something you can skip. You can't, we may have been able to skip Web 2.0, but when it comes to data and personalization, the only way you can do that is actually being able to, get that data and start understanding it and start, learning it. But then of course, with that comes like privacy concerns and risk and so on and so forth. So, we make sure that we ride on customer consent in every given time. So our relationship is really with that end user, that person that wants access to this loan, that person that wants, to be able to, send money easily. And we make sure that, you're only giving consent to what you want to share with this third party or with your favorite financial app.
So how do you think about data in this context? Because it sounds like you have a lot of data that you can collect or probably would want to collect. And where do you see the use of this data going?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that in the beginning, you kind of are trying to solve a particular problem and you're collecting data to do that. But then as you grow, you can start to build connections between the things that you're seeing. And you start to see, I can, what would happen if we had access to this or that? And even your customers get, really cool ideas of what their end users have asked for. And then you start to build these different correlations. So for us, the reason, I always make I always give the example about Netflix. Like Netflix didn't grow simply because they had the catalog. They also grew because they can tell you what you want to watch next, right? Mm-hmm. It's that recommendation engine. It's the fact that they took data very seriously from the beginning. And so that's what we actually did at Okra as well. We made sure that the data that we had, we didn't just sit on it. We understood it and we learned it, as we grew, so that we could give clients access to things like, income, revenue, spending patterns, and things like this, so that as you're, using your favorite wealth management application, they can use your spending patterns to give you recommendations on, portfolio companies that you should invest in, rather than just going based on what you think, rather than actually using real data to solve the problem.
Interesting. And I would imagine that as far as collecting that kind of data, you also are exposed to behavioral patterns that are specific or typical or representative of the continent in Nigeria. Can you talk a little bit about, I guess my question is, are there behaviors that you can glean from the data that dictate certain types of actions that you might take in terms of security, in terms of possible fraud? Are there things like that come up in the data that you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, you start to understand like not being able to just have access to data, but also be able to validate that data, right? So if you have someone that has been able to assume multiple identities, for instance, right, and they have multiple different, identities across your system, if you're actually taking the time to understand this and learn this and understand patterns, you can start building these correlations and say, okay, this is a this is a suspicious character. This is what a suspicious pattern looks like. This is what it looks like when someone, is floating their account and they're adding this much money to their account and then they're moving it. And then also, as you build, more of a data network, you're able to build correlations between transactional graphs and how people interact. And then you're able to then, based on that, even enhance your products for your customers. So you know that, okay, not only are you doing this payment, but we're making sure that it's a safe payment. We can warn you and say, are you sure you want to transact? And do you know this person that you're transacting with, and so on. We've started to look at things from how to make sure that you know what someone's true identity is, and you can actually onboard them. You can verify this person is who they say they are, and they're not. They don't have multiple identities. To all the way to how to understand different fraud patterns to make sure that people are not taking advantage of systems.
How are you finding, or do you anticipate any difficulties in getting people to buy into this technology and these services in terms of, is there awareness around data and privacy and that balance in the population, or do you need to convince them or to inform them about it?
That's a great question. I think that, we launched January 2020, and when we launched, it was very much just proving the concept to people. And it's one of those things that you're not actually proving something, because when you go to a lending company that, historically had to give decisions within 3 to 7 days because someone had to physically go to their branch, get, their bank statement, print out every single page, take them in, and then someone has to physically look and audit these documents. When you're explaining to them that now could be, done in 30 seconds or 60 seconds or whatnot, at the time, it's compelling, but then, it starts to be, does it work, right? But then when you now actually build that out and you can say that it works, then I think that another thing that was really helpful for us, and also in an unexpected way, was, the pandemic. Because when you think about that, what you had was that people that were used to being able to do things physically were now in their homes. Digital transformation became the number one conversation in every boardroom, right? It became, now that our customers are at home, how can we serve them digitally? We need to continue to give these loans, or we need to continue to provide them services and financial services and digital services. But now, how do we do that if we are a physical branch, or if we hadn't built that, those rails? And so I think then we saw this kind of explosion or influx in clients onboarding their customers, and then starting to actually and then what was really exciting is that once they understood this data, understood what they can do, is now watching them grow. They come on board with their current user base, but then now they have access to customers in places that they couldn't before, because they're places outside the physical reach of these people that needed these services. And so it then goes, how do we scale with that? So, and when it comes to privacy, of course, privacy is definitely a two-way street. So it's the privacy and concerns of how do you make sure the end user trusts you, and how do you make sure also your client trusts you. So how do you make sure, if as people are using their applications and they see Okra, they trust you enough to provide their details to you in order for you to give them access to their whatever service that they're using. And what we had to make sure is that, one, we always wrote on end user consent. There's the GDPR in the US, but we have something similar, the NDPR, making sure that we rely on end user consent and making sure that they understand what's happening in every step of the way. We also make sure, from a client perspective, that they also know that we are, we have our ISO certifications. We hold to the highest level of privacy and security standards, et cetera, as well. And so with that, I think you start to build that trust among end users that use you.
Just side note, but do you think that with the pandemic, that also affected sort of the web infrastructure and priorities to get that up to speed, or was it still mostly mobile?
No, web has exploded now because we're post-telecom now. We have, the internet, there's more internet penetration, there's more people online generally. But I think that what it did explode was how many people were building so many cool financial products, fintech products, consumer products, et cetera. So, you saw this immense amount of funding coming onto the continent. You saw, so many people building, the digital banks, building, wealth management applications, building buy now, pay later, et cetera. And because of that, you find yourself growing a client base across multiple different use cases, and being able to kind of also make sure that you're also growing from a business aspect in terms of even coverage and stability, just based on that.
It sounds like you're really trying to sort of revolutionize credit and the financial reality in Nigeria. And I thought it was interesting that you're headquartered in Lagos as well, right? Is there an advantage or a disadvantage to being headquartered in Lagos rather than one of the tech power hubs such as the Bay Area or New York City?
For us, it just makes sense because, like, Lagos is Nigeria is where we are. We're powering people in Nigeria, and there's a lot of local understanding that's needed to kind of build this out. And also, just even working with the people that you're working with, it's just understanding and being able to do research and understanding is really important here. I think that the only thing that you would see is for us, because we're remote, that's enabled us to be able to not just serve clients everywhere, but also from even a team perspective. We're 80% in Nigeria, but then we also have members of a team outside Nigeria as well. And I think that it's really just exciting the amount of impact that we're able to have day to day on people's lives. I think that I'm trying to think of any con to that. I mean, I think for us, it's just been, a lot of pros.
Really interesting. And can you talk a little bit about any challenges that you may have had bringing Okra to life, specifically as a Black female founder in fintech? And would you have any advice for other women that are trying to get into innovation?
I always say that, like, what's really important is like representation, like just the idea of like being able to see yourself somewhere else. So I think I've been kind of lucky to have a lot of amazing like Black women and women generally as mentors as I've grown in terms of like engineering for me specifically. But I think that, of course, generally speaking, I think as a founder, you're going to face challenges when you want to fundraise and when you want to bring your idea to life. You have to have a certain level of conviction about whatever it is that you're doing, because you'll hear a lot of no's. And so you're going to have to quickly grow thick skin. But I think that our approach generally, so like myself and my co-founder, our approach generally different because we understood that like every investor is not a good fit. And what I mean by that is that a lot of people, a lot of people feel like this person didn't want me, but you should also want your investor as well, right? Like it's a two-way street. You have to make sure their ideas align with you as well. Like your ideas and the way you think align with you. And I think that when you do that, you'll realize that sometimes even a rejection of maybe wasn't meant to be, right? But you can keep forging ahead and know that, one is coming. So I think that resilience is something that would be the biggest, advice that I give female founders and just founders in general. Is just, you may get a rejection and it may be because you're a woman, maybe because someone doesn't believe in your idea, but you have to come from a perspective and not let those no's register as rejection, because you're going to also have to say no to investors as well.
Right. That's a really good point. It's you're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you, and if they're saying no, then they're probably not a good fit for you.
Exactly.
Down the line, I have to say, from my limited experience, when I worked at an early stage fashion tech startup, and they would not say no to investors, but that meant that their vision had to get compromised, because every time investors wanted some changes or the app to go in a different direction, they would just kind of swerve in that direction and end up not being anything at all. So I agree with you. You have to have conviction. You have to believe in your product. And if they don't want to invest in it, they're not the right ones to.
Yeah, and I also think more female investors also means more female entrepreneurs as well. So I think that representation matters on both sides of the coins, just like,
absolutely,
as a female founder and also investment companies to have, female representation as well.
What are you excited for in the coming year? How is Okra growing, and what are you looking forward to moving forward?
I think what's really exciting is that one thing is like our payment side is really exciting. So because of that, data science, like we've always looked at data on our core data side, but now we're actually looking at that on our payment side. Like, so earlier, as we were talking about like risk and fraud and so on. And so with that, for the first time, like since we grew our data science team, we're actually growing that even bigger. So that's really exciting. We're generally growing our team generally. So if, we're always looking for a really smart.
So you're hiring.
Hiring, all across the board, but particularly on the data science side, people that, have experience in machine learning and so on and so forth. We really want to have that kind of explosion next year and the rest of this year and start to kind of look at what the future of data looks like, not just for Nigeria and Okra here, but as we grow in, different parts of the continent as well.
Nice. Well, I may know a few data scientists. I may be able to, refer a few your way. Well, Fara, thank you so much for this conversation. It was really fascinating. If anybody wants to learn more about you or about Okra, where can they find you?
Yeah, they can find me on LinkedIn. So just Fara Ashiru Jituboh, and also okra.ng.
Well, thanks for joining us today and listening to this episode. Please remember to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. And if you have any questions you'd like addressed, send them to who'syourdatanow@gmail.com. That's who'syourdatanow, all one word, @gmail.com. Thanks, and see you next time on Who's Your Data?